So this meeting is part 2 of the meeting that we did a couple of weeks ago, sort of coming up 3 weeks ago, on alternative bedding. And Carol hosted that one, and we thought with it being such a broad topic, it was worthy of being done in over 2 meetings. So the meeting this evening is going into a bit more detail on the different types of bedding materials that you could consider, but also recognising the fact that for some people straw will probably always be the best option, looking into ways of reducing the use of straw or using it more sparingly. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen. We've got a presentation. So just, if for some reason this isn't working, just if Carol, if you could just give me a wave or something. So let me, right. How do I, oh, hang on. Has that come up all right, Carol? Yeah, great. So the so as I said, so the first part looked at the reasons behind straw shortages this year and in the increased costs. And one of the main things we learned at that meeting was it's probably going to continue for various reasons, mainly to do with arable production and pressures due to black grass and such like. So, oh, hang on. So we've got, joining us this evening, we have Ian Cairns, if you just want to give a wave, who's a farmer and independent consultant who works for 5 Agri. And Ian will focus on the options for reducing straw use, and then we'll have discussion and questions. But if you do want to ask any questions as we go along, just pop them in the chat. We seem to use that quite regularly, and most people seem to be happy using that. So do pop your questions in there. Or if you want to unmute yourself and ask, if you'd rather do it that way, that's also fine. We are recording this meeting, so if there's anything that you miss or you want to listen to again, we'll be putting it up on our YouTube channel shortly after. So I'm going to start with a poll. So I haven't done this before, so bear with me, I hope it works. So what options have you considered to address basically the shortage of straw this year? So make sure I can get the same amount regardless of the cost. You're already using an alternative bedding material. You plan to use an alternative and you know which one. You plan to use an alternative and you don't know which one yet. You're considering a minor modification of your housing, so that might be putting in a scrape passage or addressing leaks or anything like that, sort of simple stuff. A major modification of your housing, so moving on to slurry instead of bedding. A change to your overall system, so maybe changing the diet or the time of calving, selling stock earlier or reducing stock numbers, or outwintering of livestock if appropriate. Okay, I think I'm going to end that. So 77% of you voted, and your results should come up. So can you see the results?
Yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you. So the results are saying that of the people who voted, the top result, 38%, is going to be, you're going to try and make sure you can get your same amount of straw that you would in a normal year, despite the cost, which is interesting. And then second place, 33%, is plan to use an alternative, but you're not sure which one. So that's quite interesting. And then the least popular result is major modification of housing, so moving onto like a slurry-based system rather than a bedding, loose housing. So that's great. Thank you for bearing with me on that one. So if I'll stop sharing that now. So the options that I sort of plan to cover in this presentation, has that moved on, Carol?
Yeah.
So paper, pulp, crumb, sawdust, wood chip, sand, rape straw, miscanthus, and rushes, bracken. So another poll for you this time. Have you ever, or are you currently using any of the following alternative bedding materials? So we've got paper, sawdust, wood chip, sand, rape straw, miscanthus, and rushes. So this is if you've ever used them in the past, as well as if you're currently using them. So 82% have voted. So I think I'll end it at that and share the results. So if you can see those, hopefully, the most common alternative material that you're using as an alternative is sawdust, 54%, and then paper and wood chip, a joint second. Some of you are using rape straw, and the fewest of you are using miscanthus. So just stop sharing that and close that. So that's it for the polling. You'll be pleased to know. I'm sorry that didn't work as well as I'd like, but anyway, it gives us a good picture of how you are all feeling about the situation and what you're already using or what you're planning to perhaps change this year. So what I just wanted to do, there's quite a lot of information on the next few slides, which I don't want to overdo you with information, but it is quite a big subject, as I mentioned before. So hopefully you can see that. So the basic principles, obviously everybody knows what the basic principles of bedding are, but there's quite a lot of considerations if you're thinking of having a change from straw. And one of the biggest things that we discussed at the previous meeting on the part one was storage. So a lot of these materials, it is essential that it's kept dry, otherwise it's not going to work effectively. So one of the big things is storage. And then I think one of the other major considerations is what it does to the land following spreading. So does it need to be composted is one of the big questions, so that you can apply it to land without having any negative impacts. And then the basic stuff that you obviously want it to be comfortable, safe for your livestock, and that's basically the main point. So one of the products you could look at, which some of you obviously have already, is paper pulp / crumb, which is there's quite a few different products out there, varying in terms of cost, dry matter, what they're actually made up of. Dry matter can vary from 55 to 65% up to 95 to 97%, which obviously varies based on how it's been treated, whether it's been dried down, and obviously the cost reflects that. So for the 55-65% dry matter, which is more like your pulp, you could be looking at a cost as low as £4 or £5 a tonne. But then for the dried product, which is going to be a lot more absorbent, it's much higher than that. One of the other issues with some of these products, not just the paper, but other, sawdust and other things, are that you often can only get it in bulk. So that doesn't suit everybody. Obviously, some people don't have the storage facilities for bulk products, but you can get it in dumpy bags. But obviously that then is adding a cost. A lot of these things you do need to contact the companies directly to get a price tailored to you and your storage facilities and where you're located. Another big consideration is waste exemptions. So some of you may already have waste exemptions for certain activities that you do on the farm, one of which is using waste materials that are classed as a waste product. So you would definitely need that if you were going to use certain alternative bedding materials. And then also for the composting process as well, you need to have an exemption. But the exemptions, it's not a difficult process to get, and they're free as long as you're under certain limits to do with how much of these products you're using. And within the paper pulp crumb category is something called lime paper sludge ash, which is a little bit different to the paper crumb because it can have quite high levels of lime within it, because that's something that they use to whiten the paper. So just be careful with that. You just make sure you definitely know what it is that you're using, because that in particular can be a bit risky for stock health because it can burn the stock. So the typical usage rates, so for beef, cattle and sheep, you're looking to use a depth of 10 centimetres at the start of winter. It can be used in conjunction with straw. And there is data out there that suggests it can reduce your straw use by up to 25%. So if you're using sort of a layer underneath the straw. But the raw paper crumb, so the lower dry matter crumb, does need replenishing more frequently and maybe isn't just as effective as the dried crumb. As I said before, it needs to be stored under cover. Livestock health effects, there seems to be quite a lot of benefit of using the dried bedding, but the raw crumb, there's less information on that, and it can heat up, which can be a problem for pathogens and bacteria. Some farmers that have used it have told me that it can clump together a little bit, and when it gets wet, it can sort of set a little bit, which is something that you maybe need to bear in mind. And a lot of it from the farmers I've spoken to, it's sort of trial and error, just making sure that you might use a bit and try a bit with the straw, or you might find that the ratios, you need to tinker with them a little bit just to make sure it's working. And as I mentioned before, there is a need to compost it before spreading to land, just to reduce the risk of N being immobilised from the soil when it's been broken down. So that's paper. Gypsum, I don't know whether, I can't remember whether I included this on the poll, but I'm hoping nobody is using it for the reason that it's, there's a high risk of generating toxic levels of hydrogen sulfide gas when it mixes with, basically with muck, with the livestock waste. And basically it's illegal, so you shouldn't be using that. And the regulatory controls on that. So, and it's not just in slurry systems, it's bedding as well, which is quite surprising. There's some research that was done, and there is an issue with using it in loose housing, so don't use gypsum. So sawdust and wood shaving. So quite a few of you on the poll have used sawdust or are using it. Again, you can get it in bulk or pre-packed bales, but obviously the price is reflective of which one you use. You can't use or mustn't use any treated wood sawdust or shavings. Again, a bit like the paper, consistency can vary. So there's different products out there of different fineness. There's data to suggest fine sawdust isn't as good for sheep because it can get it within the wool. And then the cost. So the costs I have here are actually from 2018. So there may be people that have joined us tonight that can tell me if these are way off the mark. But obviously, as expected, the bulk sawdust is cheaper than your dried, baled product. It's quite absorbent, and there's to suggest softwood is more absorbent than hardwood. And then the recommended depth is sort of 30 to 60 centimetres initially, mucking out every 4 to 8 weeks. There is a risk of mold build-up and sort of bacterial problems if it gets damp. And there is reports of increased foot problems. Again, you need your waste exemption if you're using it, and this product in particular can have a high carbon content, obviously, because it's got a high lignin content. It needs time to compost, and if you spread it straight to land, there is quite a high risk of it locking up nitrogen in the soil. So wood chip. So the aim is to get a product with a moisture content between 20 and 30%, so it's absorbent. Again, the costs I had here were from 2018, so we may be able to get some up-to-date figures, but 40 to 80 pounds per tonne, depending on treatment and location. It's a good product to use in loose housing. If you want to use virgin timber, it's usually more expensive, but there is an option that maybe if you have on the farm, you could use your own and get it chipped. A way of reducing costs is to buy the timber and chip it yourself on farm, if that's of interest. Any wood chips that have come from untreated recycled waste wood are classed as waste, and you've got to be really careful that there's no contaminants in there like nails or glass, and stressing that you only get these products from reliable sources. Again, treated timber not permitted for use. You need your waste exemptions, and typical depths that people have used it to is 10 centimetres. Applying fresh layers is required, depending on what diet they're on. So silage-based cattle on a silage-based diet, you're looking every 2 to 3 days, or every 7 to 10 days for sheep. It's quite a nice product in terms of the animals stay clean. There's not much dust. But again, it needs to be stored in a dry place and needs to be fully composted before land spreading, which can take quite a long time, sort of 2 to 3 years. You can screen it and get the larger chips back out of it and reuse them, but obviously that incurs a cost. I think the information I read was about £5 a tonne. And there's some interesting research being done on wood chip. One project is this wood chip for livestock bedding, suggesting that there is quite an impact on the nutrient level where you've applied wood chip compared to straw. And I've put the information on there. So you've got, as well as the wood chip for bedding project, which is really interesting and well worth a read, there's another project going on currently in Scotland, which is an innovative farmers project, where a group of farmers have got funding to trial different types of wood chip, and they're working with a soil scientist to assess the impact of spreading that resulting wood chip based muck onto fields. And I've noticed one thing I've found when I've been doing the research for this meeting is that that is really the big gap in the information, is spreading these products to land after you've used them as bedding. But hopefully for wood chip, there does seem to be some information out there, and perhaps this innovative farmers project will shed a bit more light on that. So moving on, sand. So again, you can get different types of sand, which I hadn't really appreciated. Cost, again, my figures are 2018 figures, so £10 to £20 per tonne plus delivery. It's widely and readily available, so you can sort of get it quite easily, not necessarily have to stockpile it. So deep bed systems farm, which again, I hadn't really appreciated that you could use this product in loose housing. I just assumed it was mainly used in cubicles, but there must be farmers out there that do use it. So the recommended depth is 20 to 30 centimetres initially and replenish as needed, but it might need levelling just to keep the surface nice and even, which is something else I don't think I mentioned with the paper. That's something else that is recommended, that you sort of rake the surface now and then just to keep it aerated. Sometimes it can be particularly abrasive on slurry and muck handling equipment, and it can be a bit abrasive on the animals as well, and it's not recommended for use where you're carving. And there is an impact on spreading to land. There is figures to suggest it can have a liming effect, so just bearing that in mind. But that depends on the type of sand and where it's come from. Rape straw. So some of you were using this. As you probably know, it's quite stalky and best used really in conjunction with cereal straw. So again, my cost, 2018 figures of £70 per tonne. I think that'll be probably different now, because it has been readily available in the past, but oilseed rape has become a bit of a niche crop. Production has been impacted by restrictions on pesticide usage and seed dressings, and it's really becoming quite a difficult crop to grow. It's free draining rather than absorbent, and like I say, best used in conjunction with cereal straw. Can reduce straw requirement by up to 30%. It's a bit more difficult to handle just compared to cereal straw, because they tend to be a bit less robust, not that good at rolling out, just because it's quite stalky stuff. Might not be suitable for young stock, particularly like really young lambs and calves. And one of the big things to check with this is what herbicide the crops had. So there's certain active ingredients that can stay within the manure. So after you've used it as bedding and then you spread it to land, it can have an effect on your grass or other crops that you spreading it onto. But it does break down well, and there's some figures there on the analysis of the straw. But obviously, if you've used it as a bedding, those figures would be different. So Miscanthus, so some of you, not that many of you, but some of you have used this, and it's really, the availability of this product depends on where you are in the country. And I'm aware that there is some Miscanthus grown over in Cumbria. Is that right, Carol? I think there is quite a bit grown over that way. Yeah, I think there is. But it's grown mainly in the south. But I think some people, or is it, maybe I'm getting mixed up with willow coppice, but anyway, the availability of it depends on where you are in the country. It's very absorbent, so it has to be dried before use, but once it is dried down, it can absorb approximately 3 times its own weight in moisture. So it's obviously quite effective. It can be easily displaced by stock, so you do need to manage bare patches, but it's comfortable, good product for keeping animals clean, but it has to be kept dry in storage, and the manure that you're left with is a good product. It degrades quickly and no issues with spreading to land. So rushes and bracken. So this, I thought I'd include this on here just because I know some of you will have done this in the past. And in the context of issues with controlling these weeds, it's something that can work well. Have sort of multiple benefits. You're mowing and baling your rushes to get rid of them as a weed control method, and could potentially use that as a source of bedding. So it's quite low cost, easy to store, readily available in upland areas, which I'm sure you all know, depending on, obviously, if you can mow and bale certain ground, you won't be able to. But there's research suggesting that bracken is at least as absorbent as straw. It's comfortable, good bedding, but the main concern is around, potential issues with animal health. So it's obviously carcinogenic. Bracken is carcinogenic, can lead to problems with bladder lesions and blindness in sheep, can cause hemorrhages in cattle. So it's can be quite risky. But obviously the main thing is make sure that they're not eating it, which is obvious. And depending on the time of year that you've actually cut it and baled it, which is usually autumn, or late summer, autumn. So there's a way of managing the risk. But I just thought I'd include that on there because it's probably something that has been done, in generations gone by. So that's the different products. So I just wanted to list, just as a reminder, really, just a few really important points. If you're using any of these products, you should be able to get an analysis. So any companies that are selling these types of products, so your paper waste and sawdust and things, technically you're within your right to ask for an analysis just to check what's actually in it. One of which is the carbon nitrogen ratio, which I'll come on to in a second. Waste exemptions, as I've said, you need to get those. It's quite easy to get them. You can do it online. You get those from the Environment Agency. Just being aware of the need for composting before you spread to land, and storage requirements before you're using the products is obviously a major consideration. And seems to be a bit of a lack of data on spreading the products to land after you've used them as bedding and how that might affect soil fertility. And just be really careful of what you're buying and just make sure that it's safe to use. So on the carbon nitrogen ratios, so the bit I've just mentioned on the previous slide, I just thought I'd put these on here just so you can see what I'm trying to get to. So your farmyard manure, typically your carbon nitrogen ratio is between 17 and 20 to 1. So just as a guide, the carbon nitrogen ratio, the higher it gets, the longer it will take to decompose, and the more likely it's going to sort of suck, for want of a better phrase, suck N out of the soil, because it has to, the bacteria has to use N to break it down in the soil. So if you look at farmyard manure is sort of 17 to 20 to 1, and then you look at your paper waste, which can be 150 to 200 to 1. And then I've found a couple of other figures. So sawdust is 325 to 1, and wood chip is estimated at around 400 to 1. So it's just to explain what I'm trying to get through to you about the importance of composting and not negatively impacting on your nitrogen levels in the soil. Farmer experiences. So I spoke to a few farmers over the last few weeks who've been using these products, and I'm not sure whether any of them have been able to join us tonight. I think they must have all been a bit too shy to come on and talk about what they've been using. But I just thought maybe I would open it up at this point and see if anybody who's on here has any feedback that they want to give about the products you've used in the past and pros and cons. And has anyone put anything on the chat, Carol?
Yeah, there was one question or comment. It says somebody has put, it's not compulsory to compost paper. but it's a recommendation. Is that right, Claire?
It won't be compulsory, no. But yeah, I agree with them. So it's not compulsory, but I would say it's a good idea to do.
So that's in terms of, you know, the amount of nitrogen it's going to take to break it down if you're spreading it too soon, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I know that we had the meeting a couple of weeks ago, and it was definitely recommended that you compost it, but it's not clear how long for. And I did try and find that out for today, but unfortunately I haven't been able to. But when I get the answer, I'll send it around everyone. But definitely compost it before you put it onto the land. Yeah.
Yeah. Kathy's just said that they have used thousands of tons of paper waste. So that's interesting. How has that gone then, Kathy? What made you turn to paper waste?
Well, we used it for bedding, and we just used tons and tons and tons of it. I don't know, we used it for about 6 or 8 years solid.
Right.
A hell of a lot of it, but we don't use it any longer.
Why do you not use it now then?
Because it's pH in land's gone too high. We're locking all minerals up. And spreading it is a hell of a problem because it's very, very heavy stuff. And as it's impossible to compost it. It's like a solid block. Once you've got it full of, it gets a skin over top and it will not compost.
Was that paper crumb then, like the 50% dry matter stuff?
Yeah.
Or was it the higher dry matter?
No, we've used both. We've used all sorts of stuff, that type of stuff.
Mm.
And well, we used it seriously when we were fattening a lot of cattle, and because it's so cheap in comparison to straw. But you do have spreading it is a fair problem. If you fill your spreader with it, you need a hell of a tractor to pull it round if there's any water in the ground. But it is cheap, and it does keep stuff very clean.
So were you using it? You'll be using it in a loose housing system then?
Oh yes, you've got it. You put a layer down about 6 inches thick, and depending on the number of cattle that you're on, it's just on your loose housing.
So you didn't put straw over the top? Did you just use the paper?
Just use paper. It were down a week or 10 days, and then it goes to glue. You have it to clean out, put another layer down, and it does work well. But it's easy to store. You can tip it outside because it gets a skin over top, and it doesn't really go wet. But it is a problem spreading it. And it also is high in lime, whatever sort you use. It's high in lime, and you end up with high pHs.
Was that more like the paper ash then that I talked about? Because I did read that you can store it outside because it sort of generates its own cap. It sort of caps.
Well, they all will. Every paper waste will. We've used all sorts of different paper waste. We've used different factories, all sorts of stuff. But it's a cheap thing to put in, but it does take some. It's a very, very solid material when you're spreading it, and you've got to have. You can't spread it out of a side discharge. You've got to have a rear discharge spreader and a pretty big tractor to pull it round.
No, that's really useful. Thank you for sharing that.
Claire, there's just a comment here from Aaron. That they just wanted to add that paper quite commonly less than 100:1 CN ratio, and when mixed with manure, the chances of N lockup is reduced considerably. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, it is. I'd like to know if they've ever tested it.
Have you ever tested it, Aaron?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm basically just speaking from a sort of agricultural and soil science background, and I just want to add that because paper is quite commonly the CNN ratio. It does depend what factory it comes from, and it does depend on the fibers you get, and yeah, especially when it's mixed with manure, there's legislation that states that you're not allowed to mix the waste together, and if you can mix them, if you can mix manure and paper together, it commonly can help it means the final product is a lot better on land.
Does it?
Sorry.
Do you think it just because I have another farmer that said that they use it, and what they did was they put the paper on and then they had to put quite a bit of muck on to sort of counteract. Do you think it probably balances itself out, or do you think there is an overall benefit?
Yeah, I mean, if you're using wet paper, obviously it's not going to be able to absorb as much muck as dry paper, but and there's also it can depend on your farming practice as well, because if you can mix a good amount of muck with the paper, then it does make a much better product. And like the previous speaker was saying, that you obviously, if you're putting a lot on your land, you do have to be careful with your pHs, and you know, if you what I was trying to just say is that the nutrient lockup isn't necessarily the thing that's your limiting factor. And if you're on quite an acidic piece of land, then and you want to, and you're trying to replace your liming requirements as well, then it is really good, especially if you're using it as a bedding product, because then you've got the muck nutrients mixing in with it as well, and the paper kind of, it reduces the runoff and kind of makes it a bit more of a slow release mechanism, if you understand that.
Yeah, no, I do understand that, and that was something that when we had the meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago, that one of our speakers on there, who they produce a product, it's Enviro Systems, and they have a couple of paper-based products, and they suggested the same, because the quantities are quite minimal, that it probably didn't really have a massive lockup effect, because you're probably only using, you know, half a ton over the whole year, or it was a lot less. You weren't using big quantities, but that's obviously I think that was in a cubicle system, so it would be minimal. Whereas if you're using big quantities on a loose housing system, I would imagine it's a lot more. But that's it. Really interesting though, because the thing is with these CN ratios, it's going to vary with every product, and it's just having that, being able to get it tested prior to spreading to land. I think that's the key.
Yeah. Robert Weatherhead wonders, was the paper used on its own or with straw in loose housing?
I think it can be either, can't it?
Another farmer's put, we use it neat, but some will mix it with straw. So that would combat that kind of problem with the breaking down, won't it, if you're using it as a way of reducing your straw consumption.
Yeah, so basically after all that, it could be quite likely that you still think straw is actually the best option for me. But obviously in the context of likely to be ongoing issues with supply and price volatility. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to our speaker, Ian Cairns. Are you there, Ian?
Yep, hi.
Yeah. So Ian's going to cover the considerations around costs and options to reduce usage. So if you're thinking, yeah, I think straw is probably still the right thing for my farm, then hopefully Ian is going to give us an insight into ways of using it more sparingly. So thank you, Ian, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Claire. I suppose I'm coming at this from both a sort of consultant point of view and doing costings round about it, and also from a farmer point of view. We've been farming at the current tenanted farm that we have here in Northumberland. We're about halfway between Hexham and Otterburn. So we're really only about sort of 15 or 20 miles from the east coast, you know, where there's quite a lot of straw being baled up and available to us. But since we've been farming here, since certainly 2015-16, the price of straw has almost doubled for us. And we buy in, we're all grassland farms, so we buy in all the straw that we need. And we run about 60 cows, suckler cows on the farm, and a few young stock as well for that winter period. So I just thought I'd share some of my own views with you and thoughts, and it is a bit of a bugbear of mine, the straw cost, and so I'll maybe try and sort of run through that with you. Just today, I weighed a few straw bales that we have. So we've got 3 types of straw on the farm this year. We've got some round bale wheat straw. We've got some 4-string oat straw. And we've also got some square bale 4-stringer again, oilseed rape straw. The round bale wheat straw we bought sort of off the field September time. It was delivered to us. And what I did today was just weighed a few of the bales to get a bit of an idea which was the most cost-effective way to buy the straw. And it's a wee bit sort of retrospective now. And I suppose we all get hung up on the price per tonne or the price per bale. And there's quite a bit of variability, I would say, in the average weight of bales. And it was quite interesting for me just weighing them today. So all this kit is, it's a weighing tray with 2 weigh pads on the bottom that I can put into my cattle crush, and a weigh head. And I don't know if you can make it out on that screen, but the left-hand bale there, the round bale of straw, that one was 189, but the average of them was 180 kilos per bale. The square bale 4-string oat straw was 142, pretty average, you know, pretty typical actually with those. And then the rape straw, which is the same size bale, was actually 113. And some of those bales were a bit lighter than that as well. Looked like straw. I find when we break it up and use it, there's a bit more mold than you'd expect and normally you would see in cereal straw. But I was a bit taken aback how light it was in terms of weight, and you know, was I getting good value for money for it? So I multiplied it up by the price I paid. So £16 for round wheat straw off the field this year. £15 a bale for the square 4-stringer, which was just delivered in the last couple of weeks, and the oilseed rape straw just delivered in the last couple of weeks. And again, this was triggered by the fact that I had ordered more wheat straw from my normal supplier, and he announced that the bales, because he had stored them for a while, if they were delivered now, were going to be £22 a bale. Having bought some for £16 a bale off the field. So he then offered me some square bales of oilseed rape straw, and he said I can do those for £14 a bale. And I thought, well, that's maybe a better bet for me. I'll buy some of that just to be going on with. So I got 50 bales of those just to keep going with. And then I've done my costings today, which I should have done at the time, really, shouldn't I? And if you work it out in price per tonne, the round bale wheat straw coming in at about £189 a tonne delivered to the farm. The oat straw, £105 a tonne. The square oilseed rape straw, just because of the weight of it is so low compared to the equivalent oat straw bale, the oilseed rape there coming in at £124 a tonne. which is very similar to the round bale that shocked me at £22 a tonne delivered, because that's so much heavier, 180 kilos, a lot more straw, a lot more bedding potential in there. It's actually the same price as the so-called cheap square oilseed rape straw. And as Claire's pointed out, you know, oilseed rape straw is okay, but it doesn't absorb the same as cereal straw, and it's certainly a lot coarser on animals. They certainly don't eat as much of it as they would of cereal straw, but it can be quite an expensive option when you work it out against the weight of it and the amount of absorbency that you're going to get from it. So I would be, you know, the cautionary tale for me there would be, I would be very nervous about buying oilseed rape straw again, unless the price was a lot lower than I paid for it. We are quite lucky, you know, we're not really operating on a 6-month winter here. We try and keep cows out, you know, most of them are in now, I would say. We've probably got about 25% of them still outside on sort of deferred grazing that we grazed through till August time, and then we left it to become quite tall, maybe about sort of 8-10 inches tall, and then from October we started to block graze that with cattle, so using electric fencing, and that really buys us another month, 5 or 6, maybe 5 or 6 weeks, depending on the year and how wet the soil gets. So that means that we're generally operating on a 4 to 4.5 month winter for most of our stock. But the shocking thing is when you add up the cost per cow, just from previous experience, it works out for me at about 7 round bales of straw per cow wintered for that period. And that includes looking after the calves, you know, up until weaning as well. But that's costing now between £112 a tonne. And if I bought, you know, on the market at the moment, round bale wheat straw, that would be £154 per cow just for straw. And I would say that would be double the amount that we were paying maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And when you think of that in your costings for how much it costs to keep a cow on your farm, I did a wee bit of a costing. You know, my suckler cows, I'm paying about £38 a cow for vet and med, just £25 per cow for purchased feed, and it costs about £100 in silage, taking the whole cost of the bales, contractor making them, and so on. So those things added up come to £170, and then potentially paying another £112 to £156 a tonne, sorry, per cow. And that's all variable cost to me. So that's why, you know, it's quite a big issue, the costs of straw. And that's for us in Northumberland. I've spoken to a couple of guys across in the West lately, and I think you'd be paying maybe £15 or £20 a tonne more than that to get delivered to Cumbria or North Lancashire. So, you know, straw is expensive, and I think I just wanted to make the point that not all straw is equal. Think about how much is in the bales. Buying from a trusted source is quite important, because some people will make bales to be transportable, you know, contractors' bales versus what we want to receive as farmers. And I'll come on to some of the other aspects a little bit later about the differences between different straws. Maybe you could move forward a slide, Claire, for me. So just thought I'd put together some thoughts on usage. And again, a lot of this is sort of practical experience from myself and other farmers that I've spoken to. Obviously, if you can store the stuff inside, what we tend to do is we bring as we use this deferred grazing for maybe 25% of the cattle up to Christmas, we have one shed that wouldn't be occupied by cattle until Christmas. So the picture on the right hand side, it's a bit of a mishmash. Got the baler in there, got a square bale straw and round bale straw, but that's all under cover. And that means from when it's delivered off the field at harvest time, it's under cover. We're not losing any to rain and spoilage. So that's what we try and do, is to get as much inside as we possibly can. The stuff that we do store outside, we try and sheet it. It's a very difficult thing to get right. We now put we go about 5 bales high with a square straw and put a sheet over it, and put round bales of wrapped silage on the top to hold the sheet down. And that's reasonably good. Certainly, it's worthwhile sheeting it and trying to keep the rain out. I spoke to one of my neighbours who didn't sheet a square bale stack, thinking that the bales on the top would absorb most of the rain and the ones underneath would be okay, and had a disaster with it, because it does run down through between the bales, and he got spoilage and wastage right down the stack to the bottom bales. It just ran down between every bale because the stack wasn't sheeted. Round bales, last year we had a good sized stack outside. We stacked them on their sides. So we had a pyramid sort of stack. It was quite a wet autumn and winter for us last year, and I reckon we lost probably about 15% of the outside of the bales would have been muck rather than bedding, just wet material. So it's quite a considerable loss, I would say, in a fairly high rainfall area when you're storing straw outside. And the question would then come, can you forward buy it and somebody else would keep it in their shed till you need it in loads later in the winter, so you're getting less of that spoilage? Certainly if you can forward buy it at a price fixed at harvest, it's generally better than waiting and then buying it later on a spot price in November or December. So there were just some thoughts on storage. As I say, my feeling was we lost about 15% of our straw last year because that stack was stored outside. Next slide, please, Claire. I feel a bit like Chris Whitty at a COVID briefing here. With the next slide, please, chat. So thoughts on usage then. First thing would be minimising the demand. So how can we sort of manage the cows to reduce the amount of straw that we use? One thing I've been working on is looking at the diet of these suckler cows. We've got about I would say maybe about 2/3 of the cows that are spring calving. We've got a smaller proportion that are autumn calving. And what we've started to do is to, instead of making, traditional grass silage of quite good quality, maybe more than spring calving cows would need, and then finding you're restricting the amount so they don't get too much and don't get too fat early on in the winter period, and then you've got calving problems. So you tend to restrict the amount of silage. And if you restrict the amount of silage to get below the cow's dry matter intake, they'll eat anything else that you put down. So I was finding feeding, wet silage, normal baled silage at say 28 to 32, 33%, they would be eating quite a bit of the straw, just because they were still hungry, because you were restricting the total amount of silage so they didn't get too much nutrient. So now we make a more mature grass into silage, and we're probably in the bracket of haylage. We wrap it. We made a bit of hay this year just because the weather conditions were good early in the season and we were able to do some of that. But generally it's haylage. So we're probably talking about 45, 46, 47% dry matter. So it's quite sort of dry material. But it does mean that we can feed that almost ad lib, and that meets the dietary requirement of the cow without leaving them hungry. So we found that they didn't eat as much straw when they were getting higher dry matter feed. And we used a noticeably fewer amount of bales during that. On the other side of it, I can give you a bit of a story about a friend of mine who said he had a few bales left of, it was wet silage, it was too wet for sheep. So he said if I wanted to come and pick it up, there was only a dozen or 15 bales. If I wanted to come and pick it up, I could have it for nothing. And I remember mentioning it, discussing it with my wife, and she said, well, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. You better go and get it. And we brought it back. The stuff was so heavy that it actually broke my bale trailer, because I've tried to put 15 bales on of this heavy material. And then when we fed it to the cows, their dung changed consistency completely. And instead of elephant dung coming out the back, it was just sort of flying all over the shed. And we certainly used a lot more straw on the back of that much wetter silage for a period of time. So I think there's definitely a relationship there between the diet and how much straw they'll eat directly, and how much straw you'll need to make the shed bedded down again if there's a lot of loose muck coming out of the cows. Other things I've noticed is when we do bring the autumn calving cows in and they're still bulling, how quickly they'll turn a bedded shed black. Just a cow or a couple of cows bulling at the time can make a big difference to how quickly how quickly you're going to have to put more bedding material down. Obviously, if you're stuck with an autumn calving system, then that's fine, that's your system, but it's going to use a lot more straw because your animals are bulling on that. And then a couple of ideas really again to do with the cattle. I suppose the first thing that came up in the poll that Claire ran at the start there, one of the options might be to carry less cattle, to have them in for a shorter period of time. And I would say don't carry any passengers. If there are cattle there that aren't productive, don't put off making a decision about them if they're going to go at some point, because every cow inside the shed is going to use more straw, and it's worth culling those animals out if they're going to go at some point anyway. And then thoughts on reducing the housing period. I saw on the poll there, I think there was maybe 15 or 18% of you were considering some sort of outwintering or trying to reduce the housing period as much as possible. Outwintering, if you think of it in its purest form, you might think, well, it's not possible for me to do that. I haven't got the ground conditions, we have too much rain, it's going to turn the ground black, I've got less grass at turnout, all these things can be a problem. But if you've got some rough grazing, or you've got land that you can put crop into, sort of winter grazing crop, or you've got sacrifice fields, it might be possible to use those areas to extend the period that cattle would be outside for longer. So it's not all the cows out for longer, but it might be a group of them. Might be heifers if the heifers are doing quite well. For me, I'll leave the autumn calving cows out a bit longer because they're quite fit, and I don't really need them to come inside until the bull runs with them. So that there are things that you can do with groups of cattle just to sort of extend the period of time that they're outside. And the big one for me is this thing about being able to get a bit of deferred grazing when we have surplus grass from August through till about the end of October. Build up that grass wedge, and then it's long enough that the cows don't poach it quickly. And by using electric fencing, grazing off a block, and then moving the cows on, it's amazing how you get green vegetation on the bit that you've taken the cows off as well. And we tend not to come back to that, but it might be that the sheep could graze that. It's a bit better quality that comes back onto that rough grazing. So maybe not advocating outwintering as a complete sort of pure form, but certainly using deferred grazing to maybe reduce the length of wintering is something to think about. Next slide, please, Claire. So moving on.
I think my internet must be struggling tonight. Pressed it and it hasn't done it.
Okay.
Sorry.
So it might catch up.
I think it will eventually. If I press it again, it'll no doubt go too far. Oh, has it done it now?
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Yeah, I was going to have to try and remember what I wrote. That was what I was worried about. So some thoughts on making straw go further. And I'm sure you'll have views on this as practical folks, you know, using straw. But, you know, one option would be having part of the cattle area bedded and part scraped. Certainly maybe behind a feed area. I don't know what sort of feeding systems you use. It might be a feed passageway, or it might be near round bale feeders. We use bunker feeders near the doors of the shed, and that gives us an option to have them on, have an area of sort of hard standing and then bedded area beyond that. Using choppers, so chopping and blowing the straw in versus rolling the bale out. Sort of straw poll, if you forgive the pun, of some of my farming mates today was saying that, you know, overall they probably reckon that chopping and blowing straw, they would save a bit on their overall straw bill compared to just rolling it out on the ground. So chopping it would make the bale go a little bit further, or the straw go a bit further. But they found that for some groups of cattle, they were having to go back more regularly and top up the bedding. So it was chopped finer. If the cattle trod through it or trod it in, then they were having to go back, you know, more often and re-bed with chopped straw. There's obviously quite a few other benefits there in terms of safety and speed of operation, that you're not in there with the cattle, you're not facing that one that just will get behind the bale with its head and shove it towards you all the time. So it takes some of the danger out of it, but there's a cost to it as well in terms of you need to have the chopper. They're quite expensive, even as reliable second-hand machines. You know, I would say 4,000 or 5,000 would be what you'd be paying for a second-hand one. 10 or 12,000, maybe a little bit more for a really top new one. And you need a tractor on it as well. So if you've got a lot of cattle, obviously you might be well into the chopping and blowing of straw compared to rolling it out traditional style. Straw bedders are another option now, where they basically roll the material out and blow it, and they're a bit cheaper. And they can go in the front of the telehandler and reach into the cattle shed a wee bit and bed them. Straw type makes a big difference. A lot of the wheat straws that we've had over the last few years have been quite heavily pummeled by the combine. So wheat tends to be grown mainly for its yield of grain, and that can mean that quite a bit of straw shortener is put on, and that makes the straw short in the first place. And then most of the combines don't have traditional straw walker systems anymore. So there's a greater pummeling of the straw and chopping up of the straw inside the combine harvester itself. And wheat particularly tends to break down quite quickly and more severely under that process. Oat straw tends to hang together better, barley straw somewhere in between, I would say. And one of the problems can be, especially if you're putting bales in and rolling them out, as soon as you cut the wrap off, they just sort of explode on the spot and you don't get them moved very far within your shed. But the greater chopped stuff can sort of disappear more quickly. So harvest conditions and combine type come in there as well. So just some thoughts there on the straw and bedding it up. Good building ventilation, just thinking about you know, sort of keeping the building sort of as efficient as possible. Good ventilation will help to keep the straw drier for longer. If we have wet, sort of clingy, misty days, the bedding gets wet very quickly and you need to rebed more quickly as well. I wouldn't underestimate these last 2 points either. I know our farm is on a bit of a slope. The steading itself is on a slope. So we get quite a bit of water coming from the hill behind us and running through the farmyard if it's heavy rain. A couple of things I would say would be the water supply and water troughs. Make sure that they're not leaking, that you haven't got leaking pipes running up to the troughs that making areas of the shed wet. Because once you get a wet area in the shed, it seems to massively spread the wet area around the shed. So that's a good tip on its own right. Preventing rain getting into the building is also another one. Even a gutter that's leaking and that water's running down the side of the shed and coming into the shed can make a big difference in terms of wetting the bedding down. And when you're on a sloping yard, sometimes you'll find that the level of the yard can be higher than the level of the shed, and you can get water running into the shed. So try and intercept that, keep it out of the shed is good management as well. And that picture I showed you of our straw shed, we put cattle in there after Christmas time. That one has a hardcore base. It's not concreted. And years of cleaning that out have lowered the depth of hardcore in the bottom, and we've actually had rising water over the past sort of 12 months coming into that shed. It's just coming up through the soil profile, and we haven't got that depth of hardcore. So we spent £1,000 putting a 6 or 8 inch layer of hardcore through the bottom of that shed, and it's remarkably different this year. So again, that's just a sort of tip on keeping water out of the shed, keeping the bedding that you're putting in there drier, and using less straw overall in the year. So I think those were my thoughts. I don't think there was another slide, was there, Claire? For me?
I've just clicked it. It hasn't done it yet.
Yeah. But I would be interested to hear if anybody else has got any comment. There's nothing come through on the chats yet. If anybody's got anything to add or, you know, take up with that sort of those thoughts.
Oh, there was another one.
Yeah. So just a summary really of what you said. You know, there are alternatives there in terms of the main ones you've looked at: paper waste, wood chips, sawdust. Miscanthus a little bit there as well, and we've discussed those all out. I think the other option, and I did a fair bit of advice in the catchment sensitive farming programs over the past sort of 8 or 10 years, I suppose, and you know, strawless systems where you might be looking at cubicles, slats, sloped floors even, you know, to keep a lying area fairly dry, and then having the slurry run to an area where you manage a slurry. You know, what would be the impact of going back to a strawless system? And I suppose the big issues would be the high cost of build for, you know, slatted buildings where you've got the storage capacity for the animals in the shed underneath that shed. So it's an inbuilt sort of store for all that slurry for a winter's production below the animals in that strawless system. And although you would do away with the cost of straw, you've got issues there with, obviously, with animals, the welfare and so on of animals. But the cost of new build is really astronomical compared to just building a Dutch barn or building a loose housing court with a raised feed passageway down the middle. And I looked up on the latest edition of the SAC Farm Management Handbook at Buildings Costs, and they were talking about £91 per metre square So I calculated that to be a 60 by 45 foot shed, just a smallish shed. And that might take 40 cows and their calves, suckler cows. The cost of putting that up with a hardcore base, all the building works, the labour and so on, £22,000 or £91 per metre square. The cost of putting up a concrete floor, a shed, same size shed with a concrete floor in, raised feed passageway, and also including all the pens for livestock and so on, and clad down to a block wall. So a really bespoke built cattle shed for loose housing, if you like. That was coming in on their costings at £173 per metre square. So for that same shed with a concrete floor in it, £42,000, 558. And 40 cows housed in there, that's £1,100 per cow. So yeah, it's about £1,100 per cow. Their costing though, for a bespoke slatted court, so again, this would be all the penning, the slats, the building itself, clad down, block walls as per the shed I've just talked about, but then with all the excavated works and the concreting for storage of the slurry under that shed, they were talking about that being up to 3.5 times as much as the bedded court. So their costing figure was £590 per metre square. So that same size shed being somewhere around about £142,000. So, you know, that was coming out at about £3,500 per cow. So obviously in the current climate, it's a big, brave step to invest in a strawless system in its most extreme, when you might just be disappointed with the price of straw and struggling with that, you know, in a bedded situation. And then on top of that, you've got the slurry storage and spreading issues associated with it. It's always going to be more of a focus in terms of managing and spreading slurry and the storage capacity calculations compared to FYM, which is normally classed as being a stackable material that can be middened outside in fields for further composting. So I think there's a few things to consider there over and above the scary additional cost of going to a strawless system. So those are my thoughts, Claire, but happy to take any comments or chat from other folks about it.
No, that's great. Thank you, Ian. I think I had one more slide. So just Ian's already covered this. It was just a reminder really about if you were considering a move, quite a significant move onto a slurry system. Obviously there's the huge costs of investment into that system, but then as Ian's touched on, there's the whole implications around slurry storage, SAFO regulations, NVZs, if you're in an NVZ area, around minimum storage and closed periods when you can't go out and spread. And we've also got the impending clean air strategy rule, which is saying that stores have to be covered by 2027. So that's with regard to ammonia emissions. And then part of the same strategy to do with clean air is this move on to low emission equipment from 2025, which is basically your precision slurry application equipment, no broadcast spreading, actually just moving on to trailing shoe or dribble bar or injection. So there's all those things to consider. But then having said that, yesterday, with the new information that came out in the agricultural plan, there is talk of a slurry investment scheme to come in from autumn 2022. DEFRA have basically recognised the fact that there's a lot of slurry storage out there that's posing quite a big risk to the environment because it's, you know, nearing the end of its life, or not compliant with regulations. So they have actually recognised that, and after years of wondering whether that would ever happen, there is now talk of there being a dedicated grant to improve slurry storage. Obviously, that's the first that we've read about that, and the detail. There's some information, but not massive amount of detail. I'd be intrigued to know whether that applies to any farmer or whether it's only for farmers that have slurry storage systems currently that they want to sort of upgrade. So whether that's available to all, it will be yet to be revealed, but there's obviously definitely an intention from DEFRA to support that financially, which I thought was quite interesting. So yes, I think that was it in terms of the presentation, and thanks again to Ian for your slides that you added in there. So yeah, like Ian says, if anyone would like to ask anything. I don't think there's anything on the chat currently that we've missed. Is there, Carol?
I don't think so.
So if anyone wants to ask any questions, now is the time to unmute yourself, or any just general comments or observations.
Sorry, I had to rush off at start of that because the alarms were going off in the farm. But I'll come back. Were you using, question back to Ian again, were you using barley straw as part of your diet, or are you just using pure wheat straw or bedding straw, shall I say?
Yeah, we've tried to sort of take straw out of the equation completely as far as the diet side's concerned for suckler cows, just on price. We're making sort of, I suppose, higher dry matter feed for the spring calving cows. And the benefits we had from that were, it was elephant dung coming out of the back of them. And we were able to feed them almost ad lib on haylage, right. And they weren't eating so much of the straw then. Compared to when we had wetter silage, we were restricting the amount of wetter silage because it was higher quality, and they were getting a bit too fat, so we restricted it. And then they were still hungry, so they were eating more straw. So we're only buying in straw now for bedding and trying to minimise the amount of that they eat. The trouble is cattle love to eat straw, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's just because we're buying wheat straw for bedding, but we're buying barley straw for eating as well. So, but purely because like you say, we don't want to get them too fat, and if they're eating too much silage, they're getting too fat, and they're also going through the silage too fast. But it certainly ekes the silage out as well. So I suppose you can put the cost in both ways, really.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any more questions?
I can add something else if you want.
Yeah, well, surely it's cheaper to feed them on straw than silage.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you would cost your silage out. Our silage is probably working out all in at about £15 a bale, made on the farm here. And straw, yeah, you're probably talking about a third of the weight in a bale, but higher dry matter. Certainly for us, we're not really pushing the grass to its extreme. If we can make silage at £15 a bale and we can get enough dry matter in there, that's almost like a complete diet for the cows. And you'd have to do your own calculation, right enough, because it might be different economics for yourself. But my thinking is that certainly we're better off just limiting the amount of straw and feeding silage where we can.
Opposite.
No, you're muted, Frank. You need to unmute yourself.
Well, we feed as much straw and as little silage as we can.
Yeah. Okay, well, it'll depend how your diet's made up, right enough. It's obviously we're talking about sort of bedding material that talks about sort of bedding material today. And
yeah, well, we only just feed cows wheat straw, but we are on a cubicle system with all our cows, and we feed as much straw and as little silage, because
yeah.
And then you don't need to make as much silage. We wouldn't have enough if we were just feeding them all silage.
Right. Yeah.
And what do you use to bed up on your cubicles?
Well, they're all on rubber mats, so we don't bed cubicles at all.
Do you have anything on straw?
We'll have about 50 or 100 fattening cattle, and all sheep are on straw if and when sheep come in, although we try and keep them out as much as we can. And then we'll have part young. We try and run a spring calving herd as much as possible, but you end up with a few calving in autumn. So we have a few cows and young calves on straw, but hopefully we can keep them out till January time and use as little as possible. So, yeah, we do use a fair lot of straw for bedding, but the majority we try and keep off straw for bedding because it costs a fortune otherwise.
No, thank you for that. It's always interesting to hear how other people do things. Obviously, in the context of high prices, you still have to do what works best for you and your system, don't you? And obviously, it's just that the cost puts more strain on everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. You're better keeping your animals alive, well, and healthy, really, regardless of cost, because they're certainly worth more alive than dead.
Well, yeah.
I think that might be a good point to end on.
Good context for everything, isn't it?
I am aware that we're just over 9 o'clock. So unless anyone else would like to ask any questions,
I was just going to say, Claire, obviously I am a farmer's wife, but I do work for a bedding company as well, just to let you all know. If anybody is actually struggling for bedding, feel free to get in touch. I can discuss with you on a one-to-one basis. We have got various options out there, different affordabilities, and if it does help, then we are happy to assist. Not everything works for every farmer, and we're happy to talk to anybody.
Thank you. It's Joanne, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So the products that you sell is it?
We do work in the paper industry. We have got the raw paper, and we have got dried paper as well. And we also are part of a big wood shavings company we own. So obviously we've got the option to to sawdust bales and in bulk. I know it doesn't come cheap, as I know myself, being a farmer's wife. So there is other options out there, and like everybody else, you're looking at alternatives all the time, whatever works best for your system. But as I understand, and I know myself, the straw is not cheap out there at the minute.
No,
there's not a lot in the bales either.
Yeah. No, it's definitely difficult. So on your own farm, then, do you use paper and sawdust and
paper, sawdust, wood chip, anything but straw, because we feed a lot of straw because we're a fattening unit.
Yeah.
But it is, and when you've got a lot of numbers, you've got a lot of muck, regardless of what you use. It's all bulky.
So are you composting everything then?
No, we don't compost it, no, at all. I have found with the paper waste, as the guy said before, you can become your world's worst enemy. You leave it too long and it becomes too clarty, too lumpy, and then that's when you get your problem with your spreading. Not made for a barrel spreader, definitely not. It is for your rear discharge, and if you can, plough it back in. From working from experiences from ourselves, when we spread onto land the very first time, we found that it sort of choked us up. It sort of starved the land because we put it on too thick. But we learned from it, chain arrowed it, did everything. But the best way is to plough it back in.
And with your sawdust and your wood chip, what you'll heat that up for a while.
Heat that up and let it get hot before we put that back on.
And how long is that, like a year or 2 years?
No, we put it, so maybe leave it for 5 or 6 weeks, and then we'll get back on. And
is that again? Is that just surface spread, or are you?
That's surface spread. We do surface spread that. Yeah, obviously we have a rotation reseeding as well. So
yeah,
I'm not in an MVZ either, so it's ideal.
Yeah, because it must stay around though for a while, the sawdust.
No, it doesn't, because obviously it is pretty black when it's coming out, because we're well stocked, we'll just say that. We are well stocked, so it's pretty dark when it's coming back out, because obviously your cow muck's obviously taking everything else away.
That's really interesting, thank you. So if anybody wanted to chat to Joanne in a bit more detail, just if you want to let me know, and then I can put you in contact with Joanne. Is that the best way to do it, do you think?
Yeah, there's myself, there's Claire, there's Sally, there's a few of us. We're all over the I do predominantly look after the north of England along with the other two. So yeah, we can, if anybody's, I know there's COVID restrictions, but if anybody wants to see anything in face to face, we can bring you samples to look at. There's no obligation.
Yeah, that's when you wish that we could do face to face stuff, because we could have, we could have had a look at some samples and had it on a file.
Happy to post them out to people either, so it's not an issue either way.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much for that. So I think if people are finished with the comments and questions, I think all I need to do is just thank everybody for attending. Thank you very much to Ian for your talk, and everyone else who's commented and fed back. Thank you. Like I said before, it's been recorded and we'll pop it on our YouTube channel shortly. Right, well, thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you next time. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.